You're listening to the Complete Performance Systems podcast, where we cover how to get really strong, increase sports performance, training, nutrition, rehab, and lifestyle. Hey guys, welcome to the Complete Performance Systems podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Hakamaki, and I have here with me on episode 1, Jake Tuura. Jake spent 6 years in academia, was the assistant strength and conditioning coach at UMD Duluth, and is now a strength coach at Division I Youngstown State University in Ohio. In this episode, Jake dives deep into training for tendon health and performance, implementing isometrics and eccentrics, dunking, general training outside of sport, and if there really is such a thing as bad mechanics and poor movement quality. I hope you enjoy the show. Jake has a great insight from a research and physiological perspective, as well as just having skin in the game. Jake, do you want to start off by telling the viewers and listeners kind of who you are and your background?
Yeah, so Jake Tuura, I am 28 years old. I got into the strength field when I was maybe a sophomore in college. I kind of didn't know what I was doing until that point. And then it was like I got into strength, like lifting, doing a bunch of research, which is basically like finding people you agree with online, and then sitting in classroom and arguing with professors and having professors hate you because you think that what you're reading is more correct, than what they're teaching in the classroom. So, yeah, I did that. Then I went to my master's degree at the College of Saint Scholastica. And so this was like, what did I do? 6 years of academia, I think, because I took 5 years in undergrad. Yeah, so then I got into an internship at University of Minnesota with Cal Dietz and then the other strength coaches. So then I was all like about triphasic, and then I kind of applied it the next year and then tried to apply it at University of Minnesota Duluth, which was my first assistant job. And then after that, I went over to Youngstown, and I've been there for 2 years now and learned a ton over this whole time of like what I used to hold as important as a strength coach. I really don't hold that important anymore because it's not necessarily about all of the things you learn in academia about the periodization and programming and sets and reps. You have to you're working with human beings, and if you're not good at that or like aware that that matters a lot, then the sets, reps, periodization, all that stuff, you're not going to get that good of results. So yeah, I can see this now with like interns or GAs or people just getting into the field. Like, what is the 6-week program to increase maximal strength in this basketball athlete or something? It's like, dude, I don't even care about that. Like if they're coming in detrained or untrained, they're just going to get stronger. But it's like, that's not the value. Like for me now, it's like I want athletes to stay healthy. I want them to increase general performance abilities, because the weight room can tend to be very non-specific. Not that it is completely non-specific, but it's like there's kind of a spectrum, general to specific. And I just think a lot of general training is probably good for general health and will increase just general performance abilities like jumping, sprinting, stuff like that. So yeah, I kind of, to sum that up, is like, yeah, all of the things I used to value, let's get athletes jumping higher, let's get them squatting more weight and stuff. It's like, yeah, cool, let's do that, but at the expense of what? Like, they should be able to, if they're in college for 4 years, I think they should be able to stay healthy for 4 years, which there are many things. I mean, I guess we'll talk about that, but hopefully it doesn't come back to me of like, I trained them too hard, they got injured, or I didn't maybe train them enough or something like that. So yeah, kind of my path is like going through all that academia and being very like research and physiological oriented and whatnot. And now like, well, these are human beings, and maybe I should try to learn a little bit more about psychology and dealing with people in that type of setting,
Yeah, I completely agree. So you mentioned it doesn't really matter what you do if the athlete doesn't feel like a human and if they're not staying healthy for their 4 years at college. One of the things I've been noticing you're really big into here on your social media is tendon health. Do you want to give some background on tendon health and how you've been training it?
Yeah. So like I value this. You know what? I really only value things that I've experienced. Like if an athlete comes to me and is like, I have this really bad like rotator cuff tear or labrum tear or something. I'm like, I mean, I'll work with you. We'll figure it out. But like the best way for you to learn something is to like experience it yourself, you know?
Yeah.
So if someone is like, if I've had a ton of people reach out online of like they have jumper's knee, you know, they have patellar tendonitis, pain underneath the kneecap. So I experienced that for years, and I've been able to learn a lot because I have skin in the game of patellar tendonitis. You know, I have it, I've experienced it, I've like done everything I can to get rid of it, and I care a lot about not having it because it's miserable to have. Um, but I think this stems from like when I was a kid. And this goes back to the RPR, be activated type idea of like maybe it's not even that idea, but that everything in your body is connected. You know, so like some issue somewhere is probably going to cause an issue somewhere else. An issue in your ankle might cause an issue in your shoulder. Like I don't know, one side or the other side. For some reason people still are like, what do you mean? It's like, why is this even an argument? Like the whole body is connected, so an issue somewhere is probably going to cause some compensation or issue somewhere else. um when I was a kid I had really bad Achilles tendonitis in my right leg, and then I did a bunch of like vertical jump programs, and then it kind of turned into patellar tendonitis. So for years I had like, in college I didn't play a sport in college, I just lifted and played basketball. I had really bad and I guess you can't call it patellar tendonitis because it wasn't acute. It was like all the time. So I guess patellar tendinopathy. And the doctors just said the rest, 3 months of rest. That's the length of time that it takes for the tendon, collagen, whatever, to resynthesize or create new ones. Whatever. I don't know the exact term they used, but yeah, they said 3 months of rest. So I would do that, and I'd get to about 2 months, and then I'd be like, I need to play basketball again, you know. So I'd start playing, my knee would hurt. I'd start playing, my knee would hurt, you know. And I got into I actually did Bulgarian type squatting where like daily maxing, you know.
Yeah.
And I think I did that for 2 months. And that was the thing that cured my like chronic patellar pain, patellar tendon pain, was squatting as heavy as I possibly could every single day. So this was many years ago, and then I kind of looked into stuff like Cal Diets with like the heel of like two springs, like one spring is, they're always, you know, it's always a muscle tendon. And if you get the spring really stiff and strong from like weight training, that can be good. But then if you get the tendon spring really stiff and strong from like plyometric high speed stuff. um, and then my friend Kyle Harris, who had interned at University of Minnesota, he sent me a video of Keith Barr talking about tendons and like all of the stuff now that Keith Barr was just on Joel Smith's podcast. So people are like, it seems like people are kind of going crazy about this, but I'm like, well, I saw this stuff like, I don't know, 6 months ago. So I've been able to apply it ever since. But
Yep.
yeah, so basically it's like you have a tendon issue and you need that collagen to kind of get healthy again, or you need that collagen to get back in the line of force that you want it to. And that's going to come from like isometric or eccentric or slow eccentric or slow concentric type movements. Um, I believe Keith was saying that isometrics were superior. I'm not totally sure on that, but kind of like anything that's very slow or held will help the collagen like kind of reorient itself. So I'm looking back though, the doctors are like, you just need to rest for 3 months, and then I just do nothing on my knee. And then Keith Barr is like, well, you need to do these heavy contractions, and you need to do them like you can do them 3 times a day because you can train the tendon for 10 minutes, and then it adapts maximally, and then it takes 6 hours of like a refractory period, and then you can train it again, and then 6 hours of a refractory period, 6 hours, and then again, which kind of goes against everything that we think and what I was taught, which was you need 3 months of rest for your tendon to heal. And Keith is like, well, the tendon actually can adapt and then be trained again after 6 hours, you know,
Yep.
like 6 hours or 3 months, you know? And for me, I'm like, I love being in the weight room and I love training. So I've been experimenting with it. Like in the morning, I would do just a isometric body weight or even weighted type session. And this could even fall in like a potentiation thing, you know? And I've used it for that too. And then in the evening, just do normal training. Whether that's upper body, lower body, but you give that tendon a stimulus, whether that's your patellar tendon, if you have Achilles issues, you have upper body issues, like some type of eccentric, concentric slow, like both slow or isometric contraction. And it really only has to last 5 to 10 minutes, and then you can whatever, rest for 6 hours, go back and do it again. But really interesting stuff. And I can't, I don't think Keith gives a straight up prescription for people, and I don't give one either. I just say read about the concepts, watch the videos, maybe see the stuff that I'm posting if you take something from that, and then go and try it for yourself, you know? Because ultimately you have to experiment and find out the best way it's going to work for you.
Yeah, interesting how you bring up the squat every day, Bulgarian style, because I actually had a similar type response where my knees were always beat up from squatting and jumping in high school basketball. And then I did the squat every day and it actually just fixed all my knee pain I was experiencing as well. But I haven't really dug into the long isometrics like you have lately. Do you want to explain kind of the isometrics and eccentrics and how you periodize these over time and provide overload? I'm familiar with the triphasic type method of it, where you go the aerobic phase, like 5 minute iso hold, then you move anaerobic, and then like lactic and all that, and then you go a minute, and then like 30 seconds, and those type of iso holds. How do you periodize it over time?
Yeah, personally for me, I don't I don't do any, well, I don't do powerlifting and I don't have any competitions that I compete in. So I don't ever do really periodization. I do like, I enjoy this and I want to experiment with this. So I'm going to do it. That's kind of what I do. So, and then, kind of with the teams I work with, I kind of try, I don't do like that type of block periodization approach.
Yeah.
And like maybe to give context, like I work with, women's basketball, women's soccer, uh, men's or women's swim dive, women's tennis, and men's or women's golf. I think that covered all that. But yeah, I don't do like a big block approach like that. It's really like take these athletes, like let's train them in like let's say all the abilities they probably need for their sport. And then sometimes you emphasize sometimes you don't emphasize others. And I haven't applied the long duration isometrics a whole lot. Actually, one reason I just went to University of Wisconsin and talked to Jim Snyder, the hockey guy. I was like, I haven't applied them because I don't know how to explain these to athletes. And I'm like, what if they're like, why are we holding a lunge for freaking 3 minutes? Or I mean, I can't even hold through three. I don't even think I've reached 3 minutes. I think I've reached 2 minutes 30 seconds or something like on a lunge because it's just painful and I have long legs and I'm kind of soft. But yeah, you know what, like how do you I know you asked me this before, like how do you start with the body weight and then you add load with time? And it's like I don't know if I have a correct answer because there's always a context to the time of year, the type of athlete you're dealing with. Maybe you're using it just for like the tendons to feel better, and maybe the thing the athlete does is a half squat body weight and they hold it for 90 seconds and it makes their knee feels better. Why would you change it? Why do we need to progress it or regress it? Or, you know what I mean? Like, why couldn't you just keep it if it's there for the health benefit? Um, but yeah, I've kind of experimented with the body weight holds and then adding load with time because I think one of the arguments was if you want the tendon to like adapt the collagen type deal, you need to put a heavy load on it. But then it's like, well, then what's the body weight long duration isometrics doing? I don't really know. I don't really have the answer there, but I've kind of played around with both, and I think it's probably good to play around with both and see what is going to help you like in the long run. But yeah, I can't give you that answer of I know I've seen Cal's thing of like the block approach to long isometrics and then doing it shorter duration, like maybe heavier. But I kind of personally do both all the time. And then with athletes, it's like there are always for me, there are always so many things going on during the year that like to focus on, we're going to physically develop this one ability. I'm like, I don't think we should put that much investment into an
Hmm.
isolated physical ability, right? For like a
Yeah.
team sport athlete, at least. Maybe if we're working track and field or something, it could be different. But yeah, that's what I had to say about that.
Yeah, I kind of started off with the block periodization as well with like the Cal and triphasic. And then as I've watched more of your social posts and that, and just I've kind of been implementing them at the beginning of my training, just on a how I feel type basis. Do you want to like talk about how you can use them kind of for potentiation or prior to a lift just to like feeling better?
Yeah, you're saying like the isometric holds.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I have quite a few like basketball athletes that see my stuff and they experiment with it, and they usually say they do isos before training or before basketball, and they feel like quite significantly better in their knees. But these are just like experiment with the different movements. Like one of them is like and experiment with shoes on, shoes off, socks on, socks off. Just see what works for you. But um, one of the ones that I think was super useful is a single leg stand, and this was what Dr. Tommy John initially brought up. Is you just stand on one leg and kind of have the other leg. You can have the other leg extended out front or bend the knee or something. But what he was saying was it connects the ankle and the glute. So if you stand on one leg, you'll feel that side glute just contract like automatically, assuming you're standing up straight. And I have seen it was interesting. I had some like knee pain the other day, and I don't really get knee pain that often. And then I did this single leg stand. I did it on my left side, and like 90-second hold, it was fine. I did it on my right side where I was having knee pain, and it was like a 30-second, and like my ankle was just on fire. And I had a hard time balancing. So I think that's something cool to like keep. Keep all the time, like just keep this ability to stand on one leg and see if the ankle and the glute are able to actually stabilize you there. So single leg stand I think has been pretty useful. Doing a split squat hold and then doing like a half squat hold, and really just get to a point where like it burns, it freaking burns a lot, and then like move on to the next thing. And like I think you usually get onto the if you're going in the court or you're gonna lift, like your legs will feel a lot more like sturdy. They'll feel like in a good way. They'll feel like stiff, like strong. Versus let's go do some hamstring stretches or quad stretches, and then you just feel loose. And but this could be some athletes probably want to feel loose when they go in to do something like this. Some athletes probably I prefer to feel like my legs are freaking solid. And then it also decreases pain. If I do a lot of that stretching, I just actually I feel worse if I do a lot of quad and that's usually where we go is like your patellar tendon hurts. Let's stretch your quad. Let's do the couch stretch on the wall or the couch stretch on a couch, and hold it for 2 minutes and squeeze your butt and really lengthen the rectus femoris and the hip flexors. And I'm like that. I don't like the way I feel after I do that. I like the way I feel after I do a half squat holds. I like the way I feel after I do split squat and single leg stands because these muscles are actually like engaging. But this whole idea of like let's shut off the rectus femoris, like for me it doesn't decrease pain, and I think for a lot of athletes probably does the same. So yeah, just play around with those few iso holds before training and getting on the court, and I think you'll probably see that you feel quite a bit better. And I have some athletes who are like that I just connected with online, like they're going to be using it before basketball games, just doing those iso holds because if they suffer with knee pain, like you want to do whatever you can to get rid of it. And I think you're probably aware of this. There's research on like an analgesic effect of isometrics before training or before something that I think it's a 45 to 60-minute thing where like you do in this study, whatever they did a certain kind of isometric hold and then pain was decreased for the next 45 to 60 minutes. So, I mean, something huge you can use before a competition. Just do a few iso holds where you have a lot of tension under your like quads, hamstrings, maybe calves, glutes, and just see how you feel afterwards.
Yeah, I know the article you're talking about. I think I came across it on one of Max Marcel's posts, but the single leg stands that you're referencing, I've been using a lot for the ankle glute connection, like prior to squatting, and it's made like a world of difference for me. But another thing that you're again pretty well known for on Instagram is dunking, and specifically the meathead dunk competition that you and Max Marzo are running. But do you have any tips for dunking? Because I know me as a strength athlete, playing high school sports and then kind of getting away from the sports and now just kind of all involved up in lifting. I still like to go on the court and be athletic when I can be. So, got any tips on how to dunk the basketball?
Yeah, you need to do it more often.
Yeah.
Like and also like if you look at if you look at the Keith Bar stuff of do the slow moves for health, do the fast moves for performance, for the tendons, and it only takes like 10 minutes of that type of activity. Like, are you going to tell me like if you're going in for strength, you're trying to increase strength, you can't go in the gym at like in the morning and go do 10 minutes of dunks, and that's going to make you super tired for your evening. Like if that's the case, like you probably need to work on your like aerobic capacity or your just your work capacity in general. I mean, doing that will probably help. But yeah, you can. I mean, doing it more often, and you could even do it away from a training session. But like there are so many aspects of dunking a basketball that you cannot simulate in the weight room, and it would be, I think, would be stupid to try to simulate in the weight room. Like this whole when Franz Bosch had his book Strength and Coordination, and it seemed like we were trying to make the weight room, or from him at least, from my take, you're trying to make the weight room so specific to the sport that it's like, couldn't we just be very general in the weight room and just
Yeah.
increase general abilities, and then just go and play the sport? So I think often we try to like bridge the gap between a squat and a dunk, but it's like, well, what are you doing the squat for? I've been doing the squat for force production, and maybe the best way for me to produce a lot of force with the legs is a low bar back squat. Do I have to then, all right, let's transition that to a high bar and then a front squat so we get the knee, the shins, and like, I don't know. I don't know if that even matters. And now you're taking away from the potential of getting very good at producing a lot of force. So I'm like, do the weight room stuff. It's very general, and maybe use some variation so you stay healthy with the squats or with the strength training, and then get on the court more often and dunk basketballs. Because you can see, like, even with the plyometrics in the weight room, like say you're doing French contrast, you squat. Let's just say this for an example. You do a heavy squat, and then you do like tuck jumps in place, and then you do dumbbell jumps in place, and then you do band assisted jumps in place. It's like when you dunk a basketball, you're usually going to be running towards the rim, and you're gonna like have one knee coming in, like it's going to be very asymmetrical.
Yeah.
And then like even your upper body, like all there's so many things going into you being able to put the ball, like dunk the ball into the rim. And doing just standing bilateral jumps in place, that is not the same thing. Even
Applying force in only that one position.
Yeah, exactly. What are the ankles doing? What are the knees doing? What are the hips doing? Like one of your hips is going to be higher than the other usually, and then you're always going to have a preferred style of takeoff, and especially if you're a one leg jumper. So it's like you want. I don't know why we do this in the strength field. I think it's because like you read an article where, like just to confirm your bias, like I think a long time ago, I read an article where John Meadows was like, my vertical jump was the best when I did chain deadlifts. So then I got it in my head, if I want to increase my vertical jump, I need to do chain deadlifts. And it's like you read that stuff and it's exciting because it's like I love lifting and I want to just like passively increase my vertical jump without doing it, because I would rather lift. But it's like, why do we lose sight of specificity? You want to dunk a basketball, go and dunk basketballs. That is the first key. And then you can piece in everything else and say, maybe you need to work on force potential, maybe you need to work on technique, or maybe you need to work on, maybe you're like, for me, I think I am probably like a force, like a force type dominant athlete, whereas maybe if I did more velocity based stuff, it would be better. Um, but again, like you cannot just assume let's do all the weight room stuff and like get very good at squatting and jumping with band assisted jumps and everything, and it's going to transfer directly to dunking, because it's not. And I think the best way to do it though is just pair everything at once, like get on the court multiple times a week and dunk, and then just do the lifting at the same time. But it's like with anything. I mean, you want to get better at sprinting, like sprint, right?
Yeah.
And if you take too long, like say you take so much time away from sprinting and you get better at like bilateral low bar back squats, it's like, and then you go back to sprinting after a year after you just got super strong, like you're probably going to see a lot of negatives to your sprinting, like your technique, the way everything looks. You're probably going to be slower. So it's like, I think keeping those specific things in all the time helps the weight room stuff transfer, and I think that's pretty well agreed upon. But I don't necessarily know how we would prove that, but it makes enough sense to me.
Yeah, that makes sense. In terms of force production, I'm definitely a force production type athlete. And you mentioned maybe mixing in some velocity type movements. So if you're way up on one side of the velocity curve on like force, do you think like mixing in more power type movements or velocity speed type movements would help with this transfer?
Yeah, because I mean, then we just look at like force velocity curve and say, like, let's say dunking is kind of in the middle, like it's a power type movement. So then your force is already so high, and it's like, well, now let's work on velocity. And I think what we lose sight of is like the specificity of movement, right? That it's like the force velocity curve would exist for dunking in and of itself. Like, let's say a force dunking, maybe you're going up with a super heavy med ball, and then velocity is I don't know what you do there to get higher speed. Like you're going up with a tennis ball or something lighter. But it's like, yeah, but in general, like a squat is going to transfer to dunking and whatever jump variation is going to transfer. But yeah, that is something like if you do more band assisted jumps, I would think that that would transfer better. It just seems like you're so limited on what are the velocity exercises you'll use. And I know I've seen like I think is Tyler Ray, I think his name is PPA. He's done like a band accelerated like approach jump, or like it pulls you and then you go into your approach. I've never used that. I've just kind of been. I personally will not do an exercise if there's not like an immediate result, like there's not an intention. Like I would do that exercise if I could go from that into jumping and touching something high. But I'm not just gonna go and do like a snap down exercise or like jump in place because it's not motivating to me. So yeah, but I definitely do think that like you're so far on the force side. Like sure, mix in the velocity stuff, but you probably like you want to dunk, just go and dunk. Like go practice the dunking. And if you want to be stuck in the weight room, like no, I need to work my velocity, so I'm gonna do band assisted jumps. Like that does not take priority over the actual sports skill,
It doesn't transfer nearly as well.
Yeah.
I see in your vertical jump program, you kind of stress concentric only, and then jumping through the hips, and then the importance of the ankle. Do you want to kind of elaborate on those?
Yeah. So concentric only I put in because it's like there was, and this was so long ago that I actually wrote this, but like I believe it was like rate coding was higher. You have a better like signal from the nervous system to stimulate fast twitch motor units, which obviously you want. But it's like if you lift heavy, you're going to recruit those anyways. But this, like you do if you do concentric only lifting, like it just fires up your nervous system. Like you feel super awake, and you don't get the like high fatigue from it. So it can really like potentiate your performance. So like all throughout the vertical jump protocol, like your performance should just consistently get better. You're never reaching a state of like super high fatigue. But yeah, concentric only, you just explode up as fast as you possibly can. You're also getting some force producing potential. And as I get more time, update the program, I probably will kind of add some variations to the concentric only. Because you're only getting good at concentric, right? And like you also need eccentric strength, you need isometric strength to like jump. But you're going to kind of build that from just lifting in general, like the squats I have in the program. But yeah, and then the hip thing was like if you look at a lot of guys who just do a standing vertical jump, like the guys who are the best at standing vertical, a lot of them will have like a huge hip hinge, like their hips will shoot back and then they'll jump up. So it kind of looks like an RDL type deal or like a deadlift. And those guys, I don't know, they jump 40 inches or so. And then, but the difference is you try to jump with the hips there. So like I'm giving you that piece of advice, but that's probably just for the standing vertical. So you get a better reading on the vertex or you get a better thing on the jump mat, whatever you're using. But when you do an approach, like a dunking, if you're going to dunk a basketball or you're going to go and like get an oop, like your torso is very upright, so that thing like you're not really jumping with the hips in the same manner. So one way I think if you want to jump a little bit higher on the vertex, like try to do more of a hip hinge, try to shoot the hips back a little bit more, even squat a little bit lower, and usually people will jump higher. And then the ankle thing was like, yeah, I think that's more maybe for health, like keeping your ankles just like somewhat having some dorsiflexion ability. I was actually just talking with a PT in Cleveland, and he was talking about Russell Westbrook having like super tight ankles. And it's like if you look at a lot of NBA players or people who jump a lot, their ankles are very tight. Like they wouldn't have a good reading on the gordiometer thing if you're testing dorsiflexion. But it's like they got tight for a reason. Like that helps them jump high. So I have a few exercises like the ankle shuffle, single leg squat to kind of push the knee forward and like get some dorsiflexion range back. Really just for health, because you want your Achilles just be super stiff. Anytime you have any area like extremely stiff, that's kind of like unsafe. Probably unsafe for the muscle, but I think the more of that activity you do, the less healthy that tendon could get. And then also I found some research that like greater dorsiflexion in whatever group, and this was so long ago, so I'm sorry I can't remember. But they tested dorsiflexion and it had a correlation to jumping ability. But I don't remember the group, and I kind of would go counter to what I just said of like you have a lot of NBA players, their ankles are probably super tight, and these guys are pretty decent at jumping, versus some of these maybe more just average population. They had better dorsiflexion and they could jump higher. So maybe you see an extreme difference with level of athlete there. But yeah,
Next question is practicing outside of your sport. So I know you've wrote about this a ton on your blog in terms of like injury reduction and just feeling better and being a better human being, just through like general specificity type exercises. So I know like in the realm that I'm in powerlifting, everything is so specificity that like that's all people end up doing. And some of the main core, accessory type lifts to help with their main competition type lift. But do you want to talk on like some benefits that you think that come from training outside of your sport, whether it's just feeling better or being a better human all around?
yeah. Let me ask, have you had any injuries in the past?
Uh, More so like in high school, I guess, with like hamstring and like that type of injuries, and then a low back fracture from like overuse. But now it's more just kind of like nagging injuries, like I'll get like a little hip injury or like that type of stuff.
Yeah. I ask because I had a theory, or I just thought in my head of like, oh, these people that can do powerlifting and just do the squat bench deadlift, and like that's all they do. And then maybe every once in a while they throw a video and they're like, I'm doing this for
Yeah.
variation, like Bulgarian split squat or something. It's um, like they do these three movements and these people stay healthy and they reach like this crazy level of powerlifting. But for me, like I've done a few powerlifting meets and it just beat me up. I felt terrible. Like one of my knees would hurt, and then one of my low backs would hurt, one of my hips would hurt, my one of my ankles would hurt. I was just like all over the place. I'd have pain in just random spots, like one of my shoulders or both of my elbows. It's like but I ask about injury because I'm like, I wonder if these people who can get to an extreme level in powerlifting, I wonder if they've never had like a injury on one side. Because like my ankle, my right ankle was super messed up, and then it was like my patellar tendon. So like my dorsiflexion is still messed up on my right side. So think if I do a very bilateral based program of squats and deadlifts, and I have this little bit of compensation happening, that's in a very bilateral based movement, like that's probably I'm gonna get some overuse somewhere, and it's probably not gonna be good. Versus I think if I played a sport like basketball, like I would have this asymmetry, but like it's part of the sport, right? Like I can move in that way. I can always have one hip higher than the other. I can always have something like that. Like, but if you're always consistently loading it in the same exact pattern with like heavy weights, I feel like maybe that caused a lot of my pain, a lot of my issues with powerlifting that made me just be like, all right, I don't want to do this anymore because it just causes pain. Um, but yeah, so it is cool if you can take an athlete and they never get injured and like you can just be very specific, like awesome. And that's all they want to do, then go ahead and do it. But yeah, I think in my setting with all of the teams I work with, I do things very similar between teams, which is like I kind of tell recruits like if you come to college, Division 1 college, and if you have you come to Division 1 college, and you're just going to play one sport. Versus we always say how beneficial it probably is to play multiple sports because you get a break from the overuse patterns of, let's say, basketball. Then you can go play baseball, or maybe you can play soccer or something for your feet. Like you get a break from overuse. You get a break from the same exact thing over and over and over. So I kind of tell recruits like you come to college and like the weight room is like a second sport because you get to do a ton of general type movements that you're not getting from the court. And even look at it from the sport. Even look at it from like the Keith Barr's perspective of fast movements for tendon performance. And like these athletes, if they play basketball, everything's going to be very fast. And then take them in the weight room and let's do a bunch of slow movements for health. It's a way you can kind of balance it out and just like you're always guessing, but like hopefully keep the athlete healthier over time. Versus let's take these basketball athletes and say fast on the court and let's increase your performance even more. Come in the weight room and let's move fast. Let's do a lot of jumps and I'm like I don't think that's the safest realm, the safest way to go. Like I think kind of balancing it out is probably better. And again, you're just kind of guessing. Everyone's guessing because you can't really measure this stuff like injury rates and whether the athlete is good at basic human movement, you know. So yeah, I mean, with what I do, I think you should just like let's say basic stuff: squats, single leg squats, split squats, like hip hinges, pushes and pulls, upper body like vertical, horizontal, just very basic stuff, and then like maybe some variations from the court or from the sport, like I don't know, jumping variations, sprinting variations, and then it's like I'll play a lot of games like spike ball or like med ball tennis, and like throw this on like a swimmer, like swimming team, who they're just in the water doing the same thing over and over. It's like, all right, now we're gonna play some game on the land, assuming like there's not a high chance of injury. Like let's go play baseball or something, like hand-eye coordination. You know what? I don't know if this keeps people healthy, but like it gives you a variation from sport. It gives you a chance to like be competitive in something else. Um, but yeah, I think the whole argument of overuse and do we need to be very general or should we be very specific? I think it probably matters, depends on the case, right?
Yep.
Like, and injury history probably too. So yeah, I think it's always kind of a guess, but you kind of make your a best judgment call.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting with weight room type sports like Olympic lifting and powerlifting, where like seasonal type sports or like college sports will use the weight room as an aid to their sport and play the sport for specificity. Where you're in a weight room type sport like powerlifting or weightlifting, the sport is in the weight room. So it's like kind of almost like the ultimate form of specificity. And then like how you vary your lift is kind of general to specific. So it's kind of this weird, I guess, case scenario that
Yeah,
you don't
and
see in like sports.
yeah. Um, And personally, I know a lot of people love powerlifting and they love like Olympic weightlifting. That is not me. I would rather not be some powerlifter who, and maybe it's because I'm not that good at it. I would rather not be some dude who could squat 600 and then throw him on the basketball court and he looks like a block of wood because he can't move, you know? I personally would just like, and maybe this is the population I work with because I am a strength coach and it's like I work with athletes who do dynamic activities. They don't value the 600-pound squatter who can't move one bit. So I've just kind of more related to them and like, hey, the strength stuff helps, but like, I'd rather be able to like destroy some of these people in spike ball, you know?
Yeah. Um, so the last question here, in terms of proper mechanics and form, I know you write quite a bit on this. So if the poor quality movement causes an injury, argument is true. Like, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah. So like I don't know if people are still not aware of this, so that we'll use confirmation bias, and it's painful to be around those people, you know, that will be like,
Yep.
like, oh, this happened, this is the cause. Are you kidding me? Like how are you that smart? Because I'm not that smart. But it's like, let's take Clay Thompson's injury, right? Where he tore his ACL there, like in the finals, and people will be like, or people will be like, want to avoid this thing, we should teach him how to land properly, or we should teach like even one video like we should teach him how to decelerate properly in a sprinting thing, and I'm like, this is so non-specific to what just happened here. um but I don't, how can you say that with Clay Thompson's landing? Like, I wonder if we could go back in the tapes and see how many times he's actually landed like in a similar way. Maybe he's landed because he played basketball for so long, let's say 1,000 times, and now he lands this way, tears his ACL once. So one time out of 1,000, he tore his ACL. Now you're gonna say it's the movement mechanics, and it's like that's a pretty bad like percentage, right? Like to tear your ACL based off your movements, your landing style, when he's done it 999 times in his life. Probably even more extreme examples out there though. Like if you played for a significant amount of time, like you've landed in a certain pattern thousands of times over and over and over, and then you get injured, and then it's like now we have the game film of the injury. Well, your knee went kind of valgus. We should have worked on your landing mechanics. And it's like, well, how about the other thousand, like 10,000 times where the knee went valgus and you didn't blow your ACL? You know, um, so there's so much going on that to just blame the movement movement pattern. I think is completely wrong. Like, how do you know about sleep and nutrition and stress levels? And like, how are you going to train that? Like, what? I don't remember exactly how Klay Thompson landed, but it seemed like he was driving, like someone might have pulled his upper body, someone might have his upper body, like on one leg. He's obviously trying to make the layup. He's fatigued, like it's the finals, you can't lose this game. And then can we replicate that with a strength coach in a weight room by saying, all right, Klay Thompson, drop off this box and land on one leg, or let's do a single leg snap down and land on one leg? That is so different. And how can you tell me like that is not? How can you say that's not a complete waste of time to prevent that type of injury? Well, first of all, you can't prevent it. You just can reduce like the likelihood that it might happen. But like I'm just looking at I think we see what we want to see as strength coaches, and we see movement mechanics, and we see maybe what muscles are engaging or what muscles might be weak or something. And it's like you just look at the movement, but like, what is everything else that's happening? Like all the stress that's going under Klay Thompson, and he has an existing, I think he had an existing hamstring issue going on at the time. But it's like that the type of stress and the type of movement patterns that happen in sport, and then we take them in the weight room and we just like restrict them. You have to move in this manner, and you have to land with your knee over your toe or something. Like that's that's never happening in sport. And I just think we're kidding ourselves when we say like let's work on movement mechanics, because if like and you know what, I was actually just talking to the University of Minnesota. I know a few strength coaches there, but I was like, as strength coaches, we'll be like, let's work on this. Let's work on your cutting mechanics, right? Like let's work on maybe stop with the outside leg and then like turn the foot and then pull with the inside. And there are different ways of people teach cutting. But I'm like, you know how we fix this as strength coaches or even as PTs or even as athletic trainers? How would we fix like this argument? Does this work or does this not work? Like, why don't we play the sport? Like, let's say me, I'm going to play basketball and I'm going to do this drill that I'm having the athletes do too. And then over enough time, I'm going to be able to say, did this drill have any benefit for me in the sport of basketball? Yes or no? You know, because I'm doing this isolated drill in this closed environment, and then throw me on a basketball court with four other teammates going against five opponents. Like, how how can I know that like this closed drill is helping me in that chaotic environment where like it's super high stress, people are trying to steal the ball from me, I'm trying to fake them out. Like you would, I mean, if you want to argue, you'd have to get a video and see like your movement mechanic has changed from day 1 to day 30 of doing these movement mechanic drills. But I think having skin in the game and actually, like, say you're working with a basketball athlete, go and play basketball. Say you're working with a swimmer, go and swim. And this is something that I need to work on myself, or just do. And this is what I plan to do this year is like, if the swimmers, I'm working with a swim team and I don't do any swimming whatsoever, hey, I'm gonna go swim, you know. Or the tennis team, hey, I want to go play tennis, because like I think we do so much stuff that we're like, yes, this is going to transfer to sport, this is going to fix your movement mechanics. And it's like, why don't you ask the athletes, do you think this helped? And if they could tell you honestly without trying to like be nice to you, I think often they'd say, there is such a disconnect from the weight room, from all the movement mechanic drills we do and what actually happens in sport. I think we, like strength coaches, we get so zoomed in on this stuff, and that is a bad thing because you can't zoom in on everything that's happening in sports performance.
Yeah, you want to be the reason the problem got fixed or there wasn't an injury, but you got to realize that you can't possibly put the athlete in all the possible positions they're going to come across in a game in a closed environment such as the weight room.
Yeah, it's actually like completely idiotic, and I'm like, uh, how? Well, then we would say, if I don't think we can say there are good and bad positions. I think if you have an athlete with like extreme valgus, like it's quite obvious, and you can be like, okay, let's actually, like, let's say maybe this is a 10-year-old athlete, like, okay, let's actually work on your movement, like jump like this, make it conscious. And I think with time, it would be very clear that you could change that. But I would even look at it and be like, athlete, if you have this like really no control when you land and your knees just caving in or something like that, like your foot's pointed out, your knees caving in, like maybe you shouldn't play sports, because you're probably going to tear your ACL. You're probably but I mean, you can obviously help them. But yeah, that whole thing is like, doesn't really make sense. And I think like if we talk about injury reduction or injury, people say injury prevention, injury reduction is like, then how do we prepare your body to handle that? You prepare it by letting them play. Like let the
Yeah.
athletes play. If they're hitting these like quote unquote bad positions over and over, like maybe we should let them play at a decent volume and a decent intensity where their body adapts to it, you know? Like because what is the point then doing the snap down drills and doing the stuff where like you're landing in a certain foreign or like unnatural position? That is not preparing you for sport because you don't move that way in sport. Why would you not just have a decent volume and intensity of that happening by just letting them go and play? And they're not even thinking of their movement. It's not conscious at all. But that I think that would actually prepare the tissues to get stronger and more resilient to the sport.
Yeah. I think you can cue an athlete to jump a certain way or sprint a certain way, and they can replicate it like in the close environment. But as soon as you let the athlete be an athlete in such a game or just a maximal effort like jump test or something, they're gonna go however they need to produce the maximum amount of athleticism to do the event.
Yeah, it's and it's like when you put a little bit of stress, like everything
Yeah.
changes, right? And like how I mean, how stressful can you make the strength conditioning, and how often is it athletes are just going through the motions and they're like, but screw this, I'm not even enjoying this. But I think the argument is like we say a strength coach would say, I care about performance in the game, right? I care about how the athlete performs in a game, and obviously we should. Well, then why are we doing all this queuing in the weight room in the strength and conditioning setting? Why we do all this queuing and then the game starts and we're not queuing at all, right? Like, isn't that what matters? Shouldn't we take videos of the game and say this is how you moved in the actual game, or should we take videos of an isolated closed drill? I'm not saying like if you're a strength coach and you went out and you queued during the game, they would obviously perform terrible, because you don't want to make athletes like conscious of their movements, when there's other things that are more important. But yeah, it seems like you do all this stuff and like let's change the movement patterns and let's make sure they jump and land a different way, and it's like then the game starts and it's just like okay, go play, but
Out the
where's the
window.
gap there, and then you can question, is it a waste of time to do this stuff? I don't know. I really don't know the answer, but I am just questioning what I see because I don't think it was well thought out.
I agree. I think there's a fine line between definitive weakness and like say knee valgus or valgus and the athlete having knee valgus because that's what they choose to have for maximum performance on say like a max effort jump.
Yeah, and I mean another piece too is when are you doing these movement mechanic fixes? When are you gonna be like looking at their valgus? You're usually doing it at the start of a session when they're fresh, right? Like athlete comes in, they warm up, all right, movement mechanic time, and it's like we're doing this so that we can prevent injuries. But when do most of these injuries happen? They happen later in a game when the athlete is fatigued, when their coordination is a little bit down. So that also doesn't make any sense to me. Like if you want to actually say like this is going to help in a game to prevent the like or reduce the likelihood, then maybe you should do it at the end of a session when they're fatigued, because you'll start to see the knees coming in a little bit more as the athlete gets tired. So yeah, that's another thing that doesn't really make sense to me.
Yeah, completely agree. Something like with fitness fatigue models and like how you get all the NFL athletes coming into their training camp and you see a lot of non-contact injuries. You're just basically guessing on how the athlete got hurt. And there's
Yeah,
just so many things
totally.
that play into it.
Yep.
All right, I think that about wraps it up for the questions I had. Do you have anything that you want to say or just give yourself a shout out on where we can find you on social media?
Yes, I've been recommending the book Anti-Fragile to everyone, and I've only read about half of it, but it has been huge for strength conditioning coaches, and I've recommended it so often to like all strength conditioning coaches I've went and talked to, because of things like confirmation bias, having skin in the game, like embracing the randomness of sport and not trying to explain the mechanism behind everything. Yeah, the book is just crazy, but. Yeah, you can find me online. My name Jake Tuura. My last name is Tuura, and my website is jackedathlete.com, where I write about things for optimizing muscle gain while also improving performance. Like, and my thing is dunking. My thing is not sprinting or any type of sport. It's just dunking basketballs like a meathead. So, yeah, awesome. Thanks for having me on, Tyler.
Yep. Thanks for being on, Jake.